clearly this question could have been asked at any point throughout the last year and a bit. It's just been very weird right from the outset watching the Boston Uprising when they first fielded that roster with their PowerPoint presentation branding, and they had players that nobody had heard of and ended up not fielding, right? Like the first players that we heard rumors of that were going to be on that roster in 2018 were the ones that never ended up being played. Guys like Avast and Snow and stuff like this, where we're sat here scratching our heads like, what are they doing? And I want to start this video by saying I've got no answers. I've got no answers. I just want to ask some questions and really like put it out there, some theories of how they might move from here and what perhaps I would do if I was in that position. It's difficult to know what Boston's plans are at any point because they're notoriously tight-lipped when it comes to communicating with the outside world. They don't enjoy speaking to journalists, it seems, even when that could be good for them, like when they could get their ideas out there and help their fans see what's going on or foster some hype in some player, or, you know, or dispel some rumor. Hook, in some sense, seems to be like anti all of that, where he deliberately picks fights with people and makes himself look as weird as possible in terms of the decision making. I think he enjoys some of the like enigmatic genius that surrounds the idea of this team, because you gotta say that, like, as much as their decision making has not made too much sense from an outside point of view, on the inside the people pulling the strings know what they're up to. I mean, Yiska wrote an article yesterday, the day before, which was about the Boston Uprising and how they seem to be the best team at being able to pick up talent economically and sell it for a higher price. Like, they are the farm team at the moment, and that seems to be their policy of like, we're going to really invest in scouting. We're going to pick up really good talent that nobody else has noticed. We're going to develop it, and then we're going to sell it on for big bucks later on. They don't seem to care too much about keeping hold of that really good talent. They seem to have a belief that they can just do it all over again. But this time, it's really weird, and I hesitate to say that it's weirder than it has been in the past, but honestly, like, this seems really strange. There was a report going out a while back about from Slasher, I think it was, about them wanting to sell Striker, Neko, and Gamsu, I think, over the course of the offseason. Obviously, this was denied because that's what teams, especially the Boston Uprising, do, and it appears that it was the truth. They were looking to sell them. Now, I think Huck has said in the past, nobody's off the table when it comes to being sold. Again, this feeds into this philosophy that Yiska was writing his article about, which I'll link in the description below if you want to check it out. It's a very good article. The idea of like, everybody's on the table, these are commodities, that we're not particularly attached to any one person. They can be good for a while, we make them better, we sell them on. That's the flow of life, baby. That's economics in the Boston Uprising. So interesting that was the case, but I think it really puts 2019 in a very weird position, because there were a lot of naysayers about Boston Uprising coming into 2019, and I gave them the benefit of the doubt. I said they've got a core of 4 players that played really well in 2018, finished 3rd in the regular season. They were really impressive. Something was going right in their coaching. Yes, Krusty has left, but he's been replaced with Gunber, and they've got another guy in. I can't exactly remember who that is, actually. But they've got a couple of other people working behind the scenes as well. So, in theory, their coaching staff shouldn't have gone like massively downwards. They should still have that kind of core ideology, and the system should still work. They've got Gamsu there for leadership. They've got AimGod to take over from Neko, who's very good. So, I thought, okay, this is still a good core to build onto. And I looked into some of the guys that they'd picked up and was very impressed with Color Hex as well. So I thought, okay, I can still see Boston Uprising doing something, especially if it comes back to the kind of dive style that they were playing all last season and were very good. Like, maybe they'll not be so good at tanks, but if we get back into a dive meta, or there's some kind of meta where you just have to be very coordinated in your aggression, that seemed to be the meta that suited this team and this coaching staff and this style the absolute best. So I think I tweeted and used the word apologist, but I was feeling pretty good about Boston. Where did I have them in my power rankings? I mean, they finished 3rd in the regular season and 5th overall, like after the playoffs were taken into account. And I had them at 11th. So I did think that they were going to slip down. You know, you can't really maintain that kind of position if you're not adding really strong talent to your team. And they actually lost some of their good players like Striker and and Neko, for example. So I did think that they were going to slip, but not massively. I mean, other people had them in like the bottom 5 for sure, and I had them somewhere like middle of the table. Okay, but this is where it's all mixing around and changing here, because I was also assuming they might... in fact, I'll get onto that later on. All 4 of these core players, so they had Gamsu and Note, the tank duo, and AimGod and Kellex. They were playing in Stage 4. They actually looked fairly decent, those core 4 players. The meta didn't work out for them. They were slow to adapt, but okay. The actual pieces that they had looked pretty decent together. AimGod was putting up big numbers. Gamsu and Note are a very decent tank duo, and Winston and Diva. We'll see how they progress if they have to play Ryan Zarya or Ryan Diva, stuff like that. And Kellex, for all the flack he gets, is actually a good player within their system. He's forced to play more aggressive than other healers, and that's why he has more deaths, in my opinion. When you actually watch him play, it's clear that he knows who the priority target is, and he doesn't put himself in horrific situations like some of the other main supports do. I actually thought that he was, for the majority of the season, when they were actually going on that, like, their really good run throughout 2018, I thought Kellex was probably about the 3rd or 4th best starting Mercy in the league. So there you go. I actually fairly highly rated him. It was just that the system made his stats look a lot worse in terms of his deaths, I think. Okay, so all 4 of these players would have been expected to start. We might have seen Axiom played over Gamsu. Maybe Axiom's Reinhardt was slightly better. We didn't really know. Axiom's fairly highly rated by other pros, but doesn't look particularly great. Like, I think that he was probably slightly underneath Gamsu, but with maybe higher potential. But who knows whether he would have actually seen game time over Gamsu. And then we were unlikely to see new guy Alamo over Kellex, in my opinion, but possibly in some kind of Lucio meta. It's maybe it may be the case that was an area that you'd want to trend more towards the Brazilian, but it seemed like both were unlikely. They would keep that core together, and now they've lost Gamsu, and I think that this makes a big difference, because AimGod was arguable as a core player, but you needed Gamsu there. Like, Gamsu was the guy keeping gluing the team together from the outside, is what it felt like. Maybe that's wrong. Maybe that's just from the outside looking in, and internally it was totally different. But Gamsu was their leadership figure, the team captain, it seemed. Like, the guy that was... I'm not sure whether he was making calls within the team, but it seemed like he had that presence, to the veteran presence from League of Legends previously as well. And if you get rid of him and you bring in a new main tank, I mean, unless Axiom is a very decisive leadership figure, then it does make sense, in fact, that Fusions has been brought up into the mix, because he is leadership personified. I mean, the man is just shouting stuff all over the place. So that fixes that component, like the leadership component, but I don't think Fusions was as good as Gamsu, particularly when we get back onto Winston metas, and Fusions has not had time playing with this team particularly, and hasn't been part of the core with them previously. So they're basically scrapping what existent core they had available. The one thing that I was really relying on for Boston to be able to still keep it together in some sense and be a mid-table team, they've broken up that core. And even though Fusion seems like a good replacement, and I might even expect him to start over the top of Axiom, because I think for this meta where you really need the Reinhardt, and the guy's got experience playing in GOATs before, and he is like such a strong leadership figure and, you know, a micromanager in that sense, then I would expect Fusions to be starting over the top of Axiom. But the guy hasn't played with them very much, so that introduces a whole new set of variables where you have to work on your fundamentals and your teamwork all over again. Okay, so that's the weird recent stuff that had happened. But I was planning to make this video even before the Gamsu shift, because I think there's a bigger question mark with Boston, and that is their DPS. The DPS has got to be their biggest priority coming into this season, because they lost Striker and Mistakes, and Striker was so good, man. And even if you want to go back further than that, they lost Dreamcasper. Like, the way that this team was built was Striker is the nutty hitscan player that we've picked out of nowhere and is really good. Dreamcasper is the decisive leadership figure who's also an incredibly good flex DPS player, and by investing in those upcoming hidden talents, we are going to unleash them, and they are going to be bomb. And it would have worked to perfection, and it did still work really well even after Dreamcasper was removed from the league with Mistakes. So having lost Striker and Mistakes, those are big shoes to fill. So their replacement for Mistakes, and, you know, more accurately, their replacement for this role that they previously had thought of and theorized and come up with and slotted Dreamcasper into, is a guy called Color Hex. He's from New Zealand. He's got a very strong Pharah, very intelligent and mechanically capable Genji, a very good Widowmaker as well, which is unusual for these flex DPS players. Other guys like Libero, Architect, Fletter, they're able to do it, and it's such a boon to them compared to some of the other people in the league that play those flex heroes but don't also play the Widowmaker. He looks flexible, very. I haven't even seen like the limits of what he's able to play because I could only catch the most recent VODs from contenders. And like when something's in one meta, you tend to play the same heroes really quite a lot. So I'm sure he's got more heroes in his wheelhouse. He just looks like a really intelligent player that can pick up a lot of stuff. And he's a really good pickup from a niche area. Like this fits every archetype of what they would want from that flex DPS role, in my opinion. It just totally fits their philosophy on scouting. They found someone somewhere that nobody else was particularly looking at, who has a lot of talent and an ability to speak English, potentially a leadership figure, I've no idea, but at least he's a fluent English speaker, right? So you'd expect, and most of the Aussies are fairly outgoing and, decisive in that way. I mean, you think of Custer and RQT and Gunba who went on to coaching, that kind of stuff. Like, they tend to be fairly outspoken. It's just in their culture. So this seems like a great pickup. But then they've also paired him with Blase, who's also a flex DPS. So he plays stuff like the Genji. He's got a really good Doomfist, actually, but that's recently been nerfed, so presumably we're not going to see that even in future metas. He's got a good Junkrat, etc. So kind of the more staple stuff for the wheelhouse, like more of a, I don't know, kind of like a hydration player, I suppose, but not as good. I think of the two of them, I would definitely put more stock in Color Hex, but we'll see where Blase can go. I don't think it was the biggest pickup in the world, but it's nice to have, and maybe they can work wonders with him. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that there's nobody to really fill Striker's old role on the hitscan DPS. Yes, you've got your Widowmaker player, but he's also probably your best Genji player and probably your best Pharah player. So it's going to lead to some weird situations. Also, who's then going to play like the McCree or the Tracer or these kind of heroes, the Soldier? I mean, maybe one of them can play a Hanzo or something. That's not really hitscan. Anyway, I'm losing myself. The point is, they don't really have that hitscan DPS player. And it seems likely that Color Hex is going to be the Zarya for them in the GOATS meta at least, because Blase has been whining on social media all the time about having to play Brigitte. So it seems likely that they do have Color Hex in that position where they're trying to make use of his Zarya and maybe his Widowmaker when he wants to swap off, and having Blase playing the flex DPS, like more of what you would consider the flex DPS that then go over to Brigitte. So it's possible that Color Hex is going to be the guy that is just a nut at all heroes and ends up picking like the McCree, the Tracer, the Widowmaker, but they really don't have anybody that seems to fit that role. So when you consider this team as a whole, first of all, there seems to be a bit of a slot missing with the hit scan. And secondly, they seem from the outside like it would be more wise, or wiser rather, to put more weight on Color Hex and really rely on him. But the guy's suspended for the first 2 games. So again, here's another whirlwind. So not only do they have the main tank stuff to sort out, and the core has been kind of messed up, so they've got that to fix, the fundamental teamwork to go back over. Not only do they have 2 flex DPS players and kind of a missing hit scan that I thought they might pick up, but nobody has yet. But also, the guy that looks the most promising out of their new pickups to me is suspended for their first 2 games. That's another big problem. So he's been suspended for boosting for the first 2 games, and that means that he misses, first of all, the game against NYXL. Now, I do not expect the Boston Uprising to be able to beat the NYXL at the beginning of the season. I think Boston, even in the best case scenario, take a while to ramp up. They're that kind of team. They've picked up new talent. We should expect a similar pattern to the first season, where they peak towards like end of stage 2, stage 3, maybe even stage 4 if they carried on and the meta hadn't hit them badly. So, first game, NYXL, fair enough, write that one off. Second game is against the Houston Outlaws, and Color Hex is still going to be missing. So that ain't good. And the problem for them is, presumably, they are still practicing with Color Hex in the roster, because he's going to play 26 games with them after he's unbanned, and they need to be working on their teamwork. So it makes no sense to spend all of this valuable preseason time scrimming with somebody else who's only going to help them get 1 win. So that Houston Outlaws game is going to be a really weird one as well. And to fill the gaps for the first 2 games, they literally just do not have another DPS player. They don't have anybody to slot in Color Hex's place. I don't know whether they have another Zarya player. So they have 2 main tanks now that Gamsu's gone, Axiom and Fusions. As far as I know, neither of those 2 play off-tank or DPS or anything like that. I could be wrong. I don't know enough about these histories to be able to, or like their streams or whatever, to know whether they're good at whatever they don't play in normal matches. But I wouldn't expect them to be playing, right? So one of them's probably sat on the bench, and the other is playing main tank, I'd imagine probably Fusions. Then they have one off-tank, Note, who's probably going to be playing D.Va, because I don't know who else plays D.Va on the team. I don't think anybody else does. Then they've got 3 supports. So the only way that I can imagine them filling out this team is by running Fusion's Note, what's his name, Blase, and then 3 supports, and running one of your supports on Brigitte. So like running, for example, Alamo or Kelex on Brigitte, and then having AimGod stay on Zenyatta. And then maybe you can have Blase shift over to the Zarya. That's a big shift up. The other alternative, the one that I think that they are more likely to go with, is stick with your 3 supports in. So you have AimGod, you have Kelex, and you have Alamo, and one of Kelex or Alamo is going to pick up the Brigitte. And you have Note switch over to the Zarya. And teams have also been running stuff like Sombra Goats, where you drop the D.Va and you run a Sombra instead. And so I could see like Blase maybe doing that, where he plays either the Sombra or like, I mean, some people were playing Mei. I don't personally think it's that good, but maybe, we'll see. So I could see them running something like that, where it's like, it's not full goats, but it's like half goats, where Note steps away from the D.Va, picks up the Zarya, because Color Hex is out, and they have Blase come in to play the what would be the D.Va role, but is now just some kind of flex DPS role. And then they have one of their supports come in to take over Blase's former role on Brigitte. It's going to require a lot of shuffling either way. Or another alternative is that they play some kind of McCree-Brigitte composition, but that would also require Blase to be a decent McCree, which, as far as I'm aware, he isn't, but I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong with that. It's been a long time since we've seen McCree in the meta, so I wouldn't really know. I haven't seen it in any VODs, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he can't play it. But a lot of question marks about what they're going to do in these first 2 games. Now, as a peanut brain outsider that doesn't know the mastery, wrinkly Benjamin Button brain theories that are happening inside the Boston Uprising camp, slowly devised there as the evildoers stroke their cats and sip their whiskeys with Gunborough and Huck chuckling over what their plan is to take over the world. Because I'm just a peanut brain, I assumed that they were going to make a signing before the season. And maybe they will. I fuck knows. There doesn't seem to be a roster lock, so who the hell knows what rosters teams are going to have coming into the season. Fun. So as far as I know, there isn't some kind of roster lock. So it seems like their best case scenario, even as we go later into the league, is to sign some kind of nutty hitscan player to take more over what they had originally theorized to be like striker's spot. Because this team does seem to be built with a philosophy. They've consistently gone after that same kind of flex DPS player, and so I don't see why they would not try and pursue that same kind of hitscan player. It worked so well for them in Season 1. So it's possible that they might have some kind of nutty hitscan DPS player that we haven't known, but there's been no rumors about this, and I haven't heard anything from people screaming the Boston Uprising, so it doesn't seem like it. But just because it's fun anyway, let's have a little bit of theory crafting about who that hitscan god could be. It doesn't necessarily mean they're going to sign him early in the season to fill in for Color Hex. This could still be, a few weeks, a few months down the road, because we might get to a meta where you really do need that classic 2-2-2 setup that we saw, like either a dive meta or a Widowmaker Tracer meta, where, Blase would have to play Tracer in that instance. So it does seem like they're missing some kind of flexibility in this team. So who could they pick up? Let's have a think. So the most obvious choices might be guys like Davin or Logix. Logix has previous Overwatch League experience. He's looked very good on Tracer. He's looked very good on Soldier 76. He's looked very good on Widowmaker in the past. He's been on poor teams, but with the right level of coaching, I think this guy could do really good things. It seems like he has a lot of talent, just raw talent. I'm not sure how his personality would particularly mesh with the Boston Uprising. From what I hear, he's a bit of like a jokester, and I don't know whether the super serious, like coaching, hierarchical idea would sit too well with him. But then again, Avast was a jokester, although he's got, more of a serious side when he needs to. Who can say? But there's some idea. Davin, of course, most people will be aware of. It seems like every time we have this discussion, someone brings his name up and they're like, he was so close to getting into the Paris Eternal. He was so close to getting into this team, that team, but he has missed out a couple of times. I think he is an owl level player. He can play a bunch of heroes, plays Zarya very well within the GOATS meta. Can play a range of hitscan. He's got a very good tracer, as people remember. He's actually been developing his Widowmaker quite a lot, which never used to be a strength for him, but now is, I would say. And also has, can play the McCree and stuff like that. Not to like a nuts level, but he's a very intelligent player, and I think would still be a good fit for the Boston Uprising. Having said that, that's not quite their philosophy with Striker. They didn't pick up someone who's like really intelligent, but a bit more like safe, like Davin is. They tended to go with like the nutty mechanical player that they can teach to be more intelligent. So maybe Davin wouldn't be the natural choice for them in that sense, but you've got to mention him in conversations like this because the guy does seem to be our level and has proven talent, proven success, so would be a boon to a team like this, I think. The more natural fit in terms of their philosophy to think of a replacement for somebody like Striker would be to look for the Korean contenders scene and just try and pick up some absolute nutball who's just been running game over fools over in Korea. There aren't that many of them, though. When you think about it, there aren't that many really great hitscan players in Korea currently. Part of that is due to the meta, I think, is that we haven't really seen many people hardcore focus on hitscan, so it hasn't been as obvious who the really good players are. But even when we have seen a lot of hitscan, it seems like most of the real up-and-coming talent in Korea that hasn't been signed already tends to be flex DPS players. So interesting. Not really sure what the reason for that is. But a couple of names still do spring to mind. Notably Climax, who played with O2 Ardiont, who didn't get picked up by the Toronto Defiant alongside Ivy, but is very good. One of the best Widowmakers in the region, I would say. Not quite as good as guys like Happy. I think Happy would have been a phenomenal pickup for the Boston Uprising, actually. No, maybe that's the wrong philosophy as well. Like, maybe I'm playing myself there, because Happy's got a nuts Widowmaker, but they've already got Color Hex to play Widowmaker, so maybe I need to dial that one back a little bit. Climax just seems like a really well-rounded hitscan player. He's got a really good McCree, a really good Widowmaker, can play the Tracer to a pretty high level as well, and seems like he's mechanically talented enough that you can just kind of let him loose, and the development process would be making his play a little more intelligent, which was the philosophy, I think, with a guy like Striker. Another guy that might be interesting is Doha, who played for Element Mystic. He's got a really good Sombra on him, can play a bunch of other hitscan heroes. I think that I wouldn't call him a nutty hitscan player. Again, he falls more into the intelligent side rather than the all aim, no brain side, but a decent guy to look at, certainly, for a team like the Boston Uprising. Once you get outside of Korea, which is weird, right? We only mentioned 2 players. Some are underage. There's a few in the Chinese scene. Most of them are underage. Maybe a guy like K-Hart from Team CC might be an interesting pickup. I think there are a lot of mechanically talented players in China. A lot of them tend to be very over-aggressive to the point where maybe that's not even something you could coach out of them. There's a difference, I think, between being all aim, no brain, where you're just like fragging out of control, and having good aim, but you're just out of position all the time. Some of the Chinese players tend to sway a little too far into that, but I think K-Hart could be a good shout. There's probably other players in the Chinese scene as well, but from what I know, most of the people that I was keeping my eye on were underage. And then from Europe, there's a bunch of decent people, nobody truly nutty, but a bunch of decent people that you could maybe try and work into the system and would still fill a good hole for the Boston Uprising. I mean, for starters, you've got to look at Uprising Academy, right? Because that's their academy team. So if they're going to pull at anyone at any point, it seems most likely that they would go for Asking. He seems like a very... wait, actually, I haven't checked. Is he... Is he old enough? I'm just going to look him up on Wikipedia at the moment. What's his birthday? Yeah, he's 22. Okay. You never know. Okay, so asking seems like a bit of a nut, honestly. Like, he fits the profile to a T. The guy's got incredible skill on McCree. He's able to play the Hanzo to a really high level. His hit scan overall looks decent, and he's got very good mechanical skill on a bunch of different heroes. Slightly over-aggressive, but that's the kind of player that I think the Boston Uprising would like to take and tame a little bit and get into their system. And he plays for the Uprising Academy, so clearly they've already scouted him and think that he's decent and just needs a bit of playing time. So that's certainly someone we could see come into the full team later on. I don't think he's on a two-way contract at the moment, though. They would have to sign him straight up. His partner Klaus as well doesn't really fit what you would be looking for, but the guy does play Tracer, so maybe if it's like a full-on dedicated Tracer meta, you'd want to bring him in and then just pair him alongside Color Hex, so that at least you have like your Tracer and then your hardcore carry flex DPS, and Klaus can just take some of the burden by playing the Tracer and then occasionally flexing off to other stuff, like he plays a bunch of other like heroes that wouldn't normally be in the hitscan wheelhouse. Then once you go a little more questionable, these are some like picks that I would throw out there, like spitball picks. I mean, there's KSP, who we saw play with, was he playing with Young and Beautiful? I can't remember exactly what team he was playing on in European contenders. And then we saw him play a few times for the UK World Cup team. Got a good Widowmaker. Other hit scan looks okay. Choked a couple of times on the big stage, but he looks like a player with potential. And I heard that he was playing really well recently as well, although I didn't catch his game. Then there's a guy like Mikey A, who's been playing games for a huge amount of time. Just seems to really put out solid performances whenever he's at LAN. I know that he gets a lot of hate because people tend to overrate him based on his TF2 performance in the past, like if they've come from that game. But he's a very solid player. When he was playing at the UK World Cup, his Zarya was very good. I mean, the bubble timings were really excellent. You could see that he's a very intelligent player. In terms of just raw mechanics, I think he's been outpaced by quite a lot of other people within the scene. But he's still got good raw mechanics and can go toe-to-toe with a lot of these people. But again, he goes more towards like the intelligent side rather than just these nutty mechanical players, so perhaps not exactly philosophically what Boston Uprising would tend to go for. Then there's guys like Onigod, who plays McCree and a bit of Widowmaker to a high level. Guys like Shax as well, who play the Tracer and look pretty good on that kind of role, and then also plays Widowmaker and some other hit scan roles. So there's a bunch of people that they could select from. Nobody that really jumps out as being perfect, other than perhaps Climax. That would be the most natural pick for me, or maybe Asking because he's playing with that team. It doesn't look like there's another striker, but that's what we thought at the time, that there wasn't another striker. There was no striker. We didn't realize that striker was striker. So I think it's kind of likely that the Boston Uprising will pick somebody up like that throughout the season. But they have a lot of issues to try and fill in, and I think we should expect the Boston Uprising to look pretty weak early on and start to ramp up throughout the season, maybe make a couple of crucial pickups in the mid-season that really help boost them, and end up settling somewhere just below the mid-tier. I still don't think they're going to be bottom 5. I still have faith in this team to continue to develop throughout the season and have an upwards trajectory. I think they're a good team at learning from their mistakes and realizing what the holes are in their team, and taking some time over the first stage to realize what they're missing and then picking up the perfect player rather than rushing into it early on. Just for anyone who's curious as well, there's a bunch of players that would fit the Boston Uprising but are too young. I mean, guys like Edison, who played for GC Busan Wave, I think is a nutty up-and-coming player, and whenever he comes of age, I think it's Season 3, 2020, he should be a hot commodity on the market. Guy like Sharp as well, who played for Team Sweden, could be a decent up-and-coming player for this kind of team. A guy called Proper from Stormquake is only 15, but I know that some other people within the scene rate him. I can't say that I know too much about him personally, but I've heard good things. Then people from the Chinese scene like Shy and Leave, obviously nutty DPS players that would be a good addition to a team like this if you're filling a gap. Glister, who more plays the flex DPS role, but we saw his McCree recently and it was bananas good, and Glister is just a really fucking good young player, and I expect him to be one of the hottest commodities on the market next year. Wait, is it next year? Maybe he's only 16. I don't know, whenever he comes of age. So there's a lot of good talent that's actually underage, but that's not going to help the Boston Uprising this season. They have to pick from the available talent pool. So I think that's pretty interesting. And I think it's not all doom and gloom for Boston. And don't get your hearts all in a slump if you're a Boston Uprising fan and you see them struggle at the beginning. I would expect them to struggle at the beginning. I'm not expecting them to come out the gates firing. I think that it will be a slow ramp up throughout the season, and a lot of it now is just in the coach's hands. It's in taking these players that they've scouted and making them better, and it's in picking up the right players in the mid-season or whenever else to make them improve. So things can look weird from the outside when you look at Boston, but that doesn't mean that disaster is on the horizon.